I never thought I'd be the guy standing in a candlelit living room, holding a bouquet of supermarket roses, waiting for a girl I bought on an app to walk through the door, but life has a funny way of stripping away your dignity when you're desperate enough. Imagine being so lonely and so pressured by your social circle that you actually went onto Temu, scrolled past the $5 power drills and the suspicious skincare products, and clicked Add to Cart on a human being. It sounds insane because it is, and honestly, looking back at the box sitting on my porch, I have to ask all of you, was I a total creep for going through with this? Or was I just a victim of the most elaborate scam in internet history? Tell me, if you were 3 years deep into a dry spell and your best friend's wedding was a week away, would you have risked $49 on a premium romantic companion, shipped in a vacuum-sealed bag? To understand how I got to this pathetic low point, we have to go back to about 6 months ago. My name is Alex, and for most of my life, I've been the reliable friend. The guy who helps you move, the guy who watches your dog, and the guy who is perpetually, painfully single. My last relationship ended in a spectacular dumpster fire when my ex decided she liked my cousin's lifestyle better than mine. And since then, I've been invisible to the opposite sex. Enter my best friend Mark. Mark is the kind of guy who breathes and women fall in love with him. He was getting married to Sarah, and the wedding was billed as the event of the decade. There was just one problem. The guest list was strictly +1 only. Mark told me to my face, "Look man, I love you, but the seating chart is balanced. If you show up alone, you're going to be sitting at the kids' table with Sarah's 8-year-old nephews. Find a date, or be prepared to eat chicken nuggets and talk about Roblox all night." I felt the weight of that threat like a physical blow. The humiliation of being 30 and sitting on a miniature chair discussing Minecraft with a second grader was too much to bear. I tried the traditional routes first, I really did. I spent hundreds on premium dating app subscriptions, polished my profile pictures until I looked like a different person, and went on dates that ranged from uncomfortably silent to I need to call the police. One girl spent 40 minutes explaining why she only eats blue food, and another asked me for a loan before the appetizers arrived. By the time Valentine's week rolled around, which happened to be the same week as the wedding, I was in a state of sheer, unadulterated panic. My self-esteem was at an all-time low, and the algorithm knew it. It's scary how much these apps know about your desperation. I was scrolling through Temu at 2 a.m., looking for cheap dress socks and maybe a set of magnetic screwdrivers, when a targeted ad popped up that changed everything. It wasn't for socks. It was a listing titled Express Love Partner, Realistic Social Interaction Model, Valentine's Edition. The price was $49.99, marked down from $200. The description was vague but promised a fully immersive social experience for events and gatherings. I thought it was a joke, or maybe a very high-end mannequin, but the reviews were glowing. People were saying things like, "Saved my reputation at the company gala," and "She's so realistic, my mom actually likes her." There were even photos of guys standing next to incredibly beautiful women at weddings and parties. In a moment of sleep-deprived brilliance, I hit buy now, and chose the sweet and sophisticated personality preset. I even paid the extra $5 for advanced conversation mode, thinking it might help me avoid the Roblox table. The package arrived 3 days before the wedding. It wasn't a mannequin. It was a QR code inside a very fancy, gold-embossed envelope with a set of instructions that looked more like a legal contract than a dating guide. The instructions said that at exactly 6 p.m. on my requested date, my order would arrive at my doorstep. It warned me that I was responsible for her safety but that maintenance would be nearby at all times to ensure the quality of the service. I spent the next 72 hours in a state of pure anxiety. I cleaned my apartment 3 times. I bought expensive wine I couldn't afford. I practiced my origin story in the mirror. "Oh, we met at a charity gala for retired service dogs." It sounded believable enough. But as the clock ticked closer to 6 p.m. on Friday, the night of the rehearsal dinner, I started to spiral. What if it was a prank? What if a 70-year-old man in a wig showed up? The night of the wedding rehearsal dinner, I got dressed in my best suit. I paced the floor, sweating through my undershirt. When the doorbell rang, I opened it, expecting a box or a delivery driver. Instead, there was Chloe. She was stunning, perfect hair, a dress that looked like it cost 10 times what I paid, and a smile that seemed way too genuine for a transaction. She looked at me, checked a small device on her wrist and said, "Hi Alex, I'm your Valentine's date. Ready to make everyone jealous." Her voice was like silk, and for a second, I forgot she was a purchase. She stepped inside, and the air seemed to change. She wasn't just a pretty face. She had this aura of confidence that I lacked. She immediately began asking about the wedding details, the names of my friends, and the specific backstory I had chosen. She was professional, almost clinical, but so incredibly convincing that within 10 minutes, I found myself actually telling her about my real life. For the first hour at the rehearsal dinner, I was terrified. I kept waiting for her to glitch or ask for a battery charge, but she was incredible. She knew my favorite movies, she remembered the fake, how we met story I'd typed into the app's notes section, and she laughed at all my jokes. At the rehearsal dinner, Mark and Sarah were floored. Mark pulled me aside near the bar and whispered, "Dude, where did you find her? She's way out of your league. Is she a model? A spy? Is she even real?" I laughed it off, feeling a surge of pride, but also a deep sense of guilt. I was essentially renting a personality. I felt like a fraud, but a successful one. As the night went on, something shifted. Chloe wasn't just following a script. We started talking about things that weren't in my notes. We talked about architecture, about our shared hatred for cilantro, and about how weird the modern dating world had become. She told me about her childhood in a small town, about her dreams of becoming an investigative journalist, and about how hard it was to pay for grad school. She seemed real. Too real. I started to notice small things. The way she bit her lip when she was thinking. The way her eyes darted to the entrance every time the door opened. She was nervous. By the time I dropped her off at the designated return point, which was just a black SUV waiting around the block, I was actually sad to see her go. I felt a connection that went beyond the $49.99 I had spent. It felt like I had met someone special, even though I knew it was all a paid performance. However, the next morning, things started getting very strange. I woke up to a series of cryptic text messages from an unknown number. They weren't from Chloe. They were from customer support. But the tone was incredibly aggressive. They asked for my exact location and demanded a user feedback rating immediately, threatening to charge my card an extra $500 for unauthorized extended interaction because I had talked to her for 5 minutes past the drop-off time. I felt a chill go down my spine. This wasn't just a cheap app. It was a highly organized operation that was tracking every second of our time together. I tried to call the support number, but it was disconnected. I tried to look up the listing on Temu again, but the page was gone, replaced by a 404 error. It was as if the entire transaction had been wiped from the internet. I spent the afternoon looking over my shoulder, feeling like I was being watched. My apartment felt small, and every creak of the floorboards made me jump. I considered canceling the second date for the wedding, but the contract I'd signed, the one I'd barely read, had a clause about service abandonment that mentioned legal repercussions. I was trapped in a digital nightmare. I began to wonder if I was being followed. A dark sedan sat at the end of my street for 3 hours. When I went to get the mail, it pulled away slowly. My phone started acting up, apps opening and closing on their own, and my battery draining in minutes. I felt like I was in a spy movie, but I was just a guy who wanted a date to a wedding. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. What had I stumbled into? Was Chloe in on it, or was she just another cog in this terrifying machine? The next day was the actual wedding. I had paid for the premium weekend package, so Chloe was scheduled to be my date for the main event too. But when she arrived this time, the vibe was completely different. Her makeup was slightly smudged, and her hands were trembling. When she saw me, she didn't give the bubbly customer service greeting. She just looked at me with eyes full of terror. During the ceremony, she kept checking a small black device tucked into her clutch. She was shivering even though it was 80 degrees outside. I tried to hold her hand to comfort her, but her skin was ice cold. She wouldn't look me in the eye. During the reception, while we were dancing to a slow song, I whispered, "Chloe, what's wrong? You're shaking." She leaned in, her breath hot against my ear, and whispered, "Alex, I need you to listen to me and not react. I'm not an AI, and I'm not just a student doing a gig. I'm trapped. The company that runs this, they're not a dating service. They're a syndicate. They took my passport when I signed the employment contract, and they told me if I don't perform perfectly, they'll hurt my family back home. I'm being tracked right now. There's a microphone in this clutch. My heart dropped into my stomach. I looked toward the back of the hall and saw two men in dark suits sitting at a table near the exit. They weren't eating, they weren't drinking, and they certainly weren't celebrating. They were staring directly at us. This wasn't a quirky app service. This was human trafficking hidden under a layer of Temu branding and viral marketing memes. So here I was, standing in the middle of my best friend's wedding, realizing that my Temu date was actually a woman in serious trouble, and I was the one who had technically ordered her into this situation. Before I tell you how I handled those guys in the suits and what happened when we tried to make a run for it, I want you to stop right now. Seriously, pause and go to the comments. What would you do? Would you play it safe, finish the wedding, and let her go back to her handlers because you didn't want to get involved in something illegal? Or would you risk everything to help a stranger you bought on the internet? I need to know if I was being a hero or a complete idiot for what I did next. I didn't even think. I gripped Chloe's hand and told her to keep dancing, but to slowly move toward the kitchen doors. I knew we only had a few minutes before the maintenance crew realized we were off script. I signaled Mark, who was busy cutting his cake, and gave him a look that said, "I'm in trouble." Mark, being the legend he is, didn't ask questions. He knew something was wrong when he saw the men at the back table. He grabbed a bottle of champagne, walked over to the table where the two suits were sitting, and accidentally tripped, spilling the entire bottle over both of them while Sarah started a loud, distracting toast. In the chaos of them jumping up and trying to clean their suits, Chloe and I bolted through the kitchen, past the confused catering staff, and out into the alleyway. We didn't go to my car. They'd be watching that. We jumped into a random taxi that was dropping someone off at the hotel next door, and I told the driver to just go. I gave him $100 bill and told him to drive until I said stop. We ended up at a 24-hour diner 3 towns over, both of us shaking, her still in her formal gown and me in my tuxedo. Chloe was sobbing now, the adrenaline finally wearing off. She told me the full extent of the horror. The Express Love app was just one of many fronts. They used the massive traffic on sites like Temu to find low-risk targets, socially anxious men who would be too embarrassed to report anything weird to the authorities. They had a network of safe houses, and the black SUV I saw was just one of a dozen. She told me about dozens of other girls, some who had disappeared, others who were being moved across state lines under the guise of premium delivery. The app was a front for a high-end social escort ring that targeted lonely tech guys because they knew we wouldn't ask questions. They used the Temu branding as a way to hide in plain sight and make it seem like a cheap, viral joke. But once a girl was in the system, they trapped them with predatory contracts and debt for their clothing and training. She hadn't seen her family in 6 months. Every time she tried to run, they reminded her that they had her home address and her sister's school schedule. She described the nights spent crying in cold, shared rooms and the constant fear of being decommissioned if she didn't please the clients. It was a factory of misery designed to look like a bargain. We spent the rest of the night talking to a lawyer friend of mine, and eventually going to the police. It wasn't easy. The police initially thought I was crazy. Who buys a person on Temu? But when I showed them the terms of service on the app and the tracking device Chloe had managed to hide in the lining of her dress, they took it seriously. It turned out the company was already under investigation by a federal task force, and Chloe's testimony was the final nail in their coffin. They raided the warehouse where she was being kept 2 days later, and found 14 other women in similar situations, all living in cramped conditions while being forced to attend high society events. The whole thing made local news, though thankfully, my lawyer friend managed to keep my name out of it to avoid the "man buys date on Temu" headline that would have ruined my professional life. I spent weeks in a state of paranoia, looking over my shoulder every time I saw a black SUV, but eventually, the arrests were made and the threat faded. I stayed in a hotel for a month, too afraid to go back to my apartment. I watched the news every night, seeing the faces of the men who had been following us being led away in handcuffs. It was surreal. I had gone from a lonely guy looking for a wedding date to a key witness in a federal trafficking case. But the story didn't end with the arrests. About a month later, I received a package in the mail. It had no return address. Inside was a small, hand-carved wooden bird and a note from Chloe. She had moved back to her home country to be with her family, while the legal case proceeded. She wrote that for the first time in years, she felt safe. She thanked me for not being the customer she expected, but the friend she needed. It hit me then that my loneliness, as painful as it felt, was nothing compared to the prison she was living in. I had spent so much time worrying about sitting at the kids' table that I had almost missed the chance to be a decent human being. I looked at that wooden bird and realized it was worth more than any premium social interaction package could ever offer. I kept that bird on my mantle as a reminder of the night I grew up. My perspective on dating, apps, and the internet had shifted permanently. I realized how much we take for granted, and how easily we can become part of a problem without even knowing it. In the end, Chloe got her passport back and a massive settlement from the company's seized assets. As for us, well, you'd think we'd have started a romantic relationship after all that, but the truth is a bit more grounded. We're actually great friends now. We talk on Zoom every few weeks. She's finishing her degree in journalism, ironically focusing on human rights and digital exploitation. And I've finally learned that you can't shortcut human connection through an app, especially one that sells 99-cent kitchen spatulas. I ended up sitting at that kid's table for the last half of Mark's wedding after the police interview. And honestly, the chicken nuggets were great, and I learned more about Minecraft than I ever thought possible. It was a hell of a lot better than being part of a human trafficking ring. I look back on that Valentine's Day, and I don't feel the sting of being single anymore. I feel the weight of a life saved. I learned that being alone isn't a curse, but being complicit in someone else's suffering is a nightmare you can't wake up from. My life changed that night. I stopped swiping on apps. I started volunteering at a local center for investigative advocacy. I found a community of people who actually care about the world. And through that, I found a sense of belonging I never got from a +1 invitation. I even met someone there, a real person, with a real name, who I met through shared passion rather than a credit card transaction. The moral of the story is pretty simple. If something seems too good to be true, especially if it involves ordering a human being on the internet for less than the price of a video game, stay far, far away. Real love and real connection don't come in a vacuum-sealed bag with a tracking number. They come from being yourself. Even if that means eating at the kids' table once in a while. Don't let your desperation blind you to the reality of the digital world. There are predators out there who feed on our loneliness, turning our desire for companionship into a commodity. We live in an age where everything is available at a click, but the most important things in life, trust, safety, and love, can never be bought. If you think I did the right thing by helping Chloe, or if you think the whole situation is just too weird to believe, hit that like button right now. It really helps the channel grow, and lets me know you want more of these insane, only on Reddit stories. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one, because believe me, the internet only gets weirder from here. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I overstep, or did I save a life? What would you have done if you found out your date was a victim? Would you have stayed to protect her or run for your own safety? I'll see you all in the next story.